Damn, I love that intro. Welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Channel. I'm Adam JD Martin, your host, and today we're going to be having a real estate roundtable wrapping up 2024. If you guys have been following the channel over the last year, you know that we've been meeting every single month doing market updates with some of our local experts all across Ontario. These people are really doing deals. These are real estate investors. These are realtors. These are experts in their areas and where they're investing, their markets. And every single month we bring them back and we hear a little bit more about what's going on in the community, what's going on with the stats, what do we think the insights are for investors like yourselves at home watching, and what actual information you need to know so that you can spend your time investing in yourself and investing in your actual business goals rather than doing all the homework. And by doing that, we allow these experts to just sort of take some of that work out of your hands. And I've had a really great time with the channel over the last year. We've done a few series lately that got a lot of attention and were very exciting for us, talking about density. So we just did an ADU series. I think we've released 3 out of 12 videos so far. We've got a lot more videos coming on the ADU front. And I know we've had a lot of interesting comments regarding the ADUs and the types of costs and things like that. But the purpose of this channel is to uncover the strategies that are working today, right? We want to understand what's actually going on in the market. We want to understand what are real investors doing today to find profits, even when rates could be high, inflation was high, unemployment was high, and honestly, inventory was super low for a very long time. Now we're entering a new market, a new phase, and we're wrapping up 2024. And so I thought it'd be fun to have our experts all on here and do a roundtable. But as you guys know, realtors are like chasing cats and herding them. And so a few of them weren't able to make it today, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have a great show because this is the Canadian Real Estate Channel and we keep thinking on our toes. Luckily, we have 3 of our actual favorites here. Okay, these are the top 3 of our market experts, the absolute best, the ones that always show up. Okay, and first we have, bringing to the stage for you guys, Kayla Smith. Kayla, Niagara region, tell us a little bit about yourself, brief intro, and what you're doing here today.
All right. Hey guys, Kayla Smith from the Niagara region. Run the Smith & Co Realty team. Our office is downtown St. Catharines. If you're ever in the area, come visit. We have great coffee. Market busier, which is weird because we're running right into December. But anecdotally, our clients are out there. Some interest rate information, obviously, that helped that. Some first-time home buyer information that's helped that. And just a lot of opportunity in Niagara because we still have quite a lot of inventory. So that's kind of the story for us right now.
All right. I love that. And I know the Niagara updates have been very fascinating. One thing Kayla's always done for her market updates that I think has been extraordinarily valuable for us is the community updates. We've consistently seen from Kayla updates with interactive maps, upcoming dates that are important if you're an Airbnb host or a short-term rental investor. We've seen developments and insights into where the most valuable properties look like they're going to be coming up in the new year. And I've always found that was a really interesting, unique take that you brought to the Canadian Real Estate Channel, Kayla. So thank you so much. Next up, heck yeah. And next we've got Saman Habibi. What's up, Habibi?
What's up, guys? Thank you for having me on. This is awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What brings you here today? Where do you work? What do you do? Why should we care?
Yes. So Saman Habibi, I'm out of the Durham region, and I operate the DR Real Estate Group, which is a Durham region real estate group here in the Durham region. We cover anywhere from Pickering to the Clarington area, and don't mind my son crying in the background. But yeah, all things real estate. We work a lot with investors, with end users, and just try and be that that connecting bond between our clients, our vendors, and just anyone that's involved in the real estate transaction.
That's awesome. And Saman, I think one unique thing that you brought to the Canadian Real Estate Channel this year that I thought was really interesting and great for the viewers, and I would love to see other experts on the channel start doing this, is you started breaking down the number of listings into categories that were a lot more manageable. So I know there were times when there would maybe be 1,200 listings in a certain category, in a certain product, and you would break that down to say, hey, there's actually 50 of these that are under $1 million that you could be looking for today, right? Which is really fascinating because when you're looking at a huge elephant, you try and start to think about how do we take this thing down one bite at a time. I thought you did a great job at subdividing and dividing those categories into something more manageable insightful for us. And it was really insightful for anybody in the Durham region to really understand the stats and what they could do with it. So I appreciate you bringing that to us. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today with you because I know we've got lots to talk about. And that brings me to our final panel member, Abdullah Madge, and he's on the road, baby. And this is a live show. So guess what? We've got people on the road. We've got cats. We've got dogs. We've got screaming children. And it's all happening live here in front of your face. So I hope you enjoy the show today. Abdullah, who are you? Why are you here? Why should we care?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm currently parked now, but I'll just do the rest of it from this car. I wish I could have Kayla's beautiful green screen there. Yeah, my name's Abdullah. I'm local Hamilton realtor. Been at it a good 10 years now. Been a part of the Canadian Real Estate Channel. I'm trying to think. It's got to be like pushing 3.5 years. But I have the privilege of not only selling, I have a small sales team with the Madge Realty Group, and I do operate at the brokerage level with 40 agents. So something I've been doing for almost 3 years, which has been a really cool experience. But investor through and through, 11 years on that front. I think we do have the power team in Hamilton with construction planning and mortgages. So been a part of this channel a long time, and just super pumped to be doing this roundtable, even if it's from my depreciating asset here.
Hey, gotta love it. Gotta love the real estate investing advice from the cat. Hey, it doesn't hurt anything, man. And honestly, the lighting's just as good as your office, so I think we're off to a great start.
Right
we're always giving Abdullah shit about his lighting, and well, nothing has changed. And so here we are after multiple years on the channel, and we can't figure out a light. But who am I to judge when I've got shadows all over the heck behind me? Yeah. But anyways, guys, let's jump right into our real estate discussion today. Oh, sorry. One thing that I did for everyone else, I'm not going to forget about you, Abdullah. One thing I love that you brought to the channel this year for us that I thought was really unique and interesting is you brought us a lot of really interesting commercial deals. And I know that that doesn't hit everybody at home quite the same way. On this channel in particular, we have a lot of residential investors, particularly small to medium multifamily investors seems to be our core demographic. But what I love, Abdullah, was you brought those commercial deals to us, whether that was a business or a large building, and you backed it up with stats. And that's one of the things that I love about this channel is this is real people doing real things. If we bring something to the channel, we're going to back it up with stats that you can debate us on in the comments or live in person when you actually talk to us, because we're actually making these investments. A little background on myself. If you made it this far into the channel and don't know who I am or why the hell you clicked on this link today, my name's Adam J.D. Martin. I've been investing in real estate for a number of years now, I guess kind of coming up to 6-8 years. I've done everything. So my best deal was kind of a unicorn deal, 96% loan to value vendor take back with a 13-year term at a 3% rate that I pre-negotiated after knocking about 1,000 doors looking for somebody who would agree to that deal, and got into that deal, started house hacking it, lived in the basement, rented out the top, first as an Airbnb and student rental, and then later as a longer term rental, and then eventually sold that property, moving into other smaller opportunities. I did a small flip. I bought a completely derelict, terrible, falling down, beaten up D-class fourplex and turned that into a beautiful polished turd, and then moved on to bigger stuff. So got myself a 24-unit building and a few other assets, and then made Canada's probably largest wholesaling company, which is interesting that we're all sitting here today as realtors. Eventually exited that business as tax rules and everything else changed, but needless to say, I've tried it all, right? So I've done student rentals, short-term rentals, small multifamily, single family, house hacking, vendor take-back mortgages. I've negotiated probably a dozen of those. And I've kind of really just made my real estate career about exploring unique perspectives and exploring how to do things without any money or education or honestly at the start a network. And what the Canadian Real Estate Channel became is sort of the fruits of a lot of efforts to bring people together. So I thank everybody that's here today, because I would never have gotten anywhere near as far as I did in real estate if it wasn't for the network of people surrounding me. It is people like Kayla, like Saman, like Abdullah sitting here today that are willing to share information with you as an expert that can help you get to the next step. So I do recommend if you have any questions during this stream, just drop a comment and I'll answer all the questions, especially if they're hard ones. I love hard questions. I'll just throw them at Abdallah and then mute myself and then let him take all the heat. And yeah, but we'll make sure we answer everybody here because this is kind of like a family run business, right? We kept it in the family. Matt McKeever started this channel in 2017, I think. And his whole goal was to change one person's life, right? If he could make this channel make a bunch of content value forward for you guys and it could change just one person's life, it would be worth doing the stream. And that's what I said before we started this. We're doing it live. So there's going to be screaming kids. There's going to be knocks on the door. There's going to be doorbells. Probably someone didn't realize how to put their phone or their computer on Do Not Disturb. Kayla looking at you. And so we're going to get the dings and the dongs, but that's okay because we're here to hopefully help just one person today. And if we can do that, this was worth all of our time and all of the effort that we put into the Canadian Real Estate Channel, and it wouldn't be possible without you at home. So let's start talking about real estate because everyone's sick of me by now. Okay, home sales activity. By October 2024, there was a 7.7 month-over-month increase in home sales, reaching levels not seen since April 2022. I'm just going to read off some random shit here. Regional variations. In Ontario, the average home price in October 2024 was $878,000, marking a 3.2% monthly increase and a 2.6% annual rise. The GTA experienced a 43% year-over-year surge in home sales during the same month. And in terms of interest rates and affordability, the Bank of Canada has obviously just cut rates again, bringing us down to 3.25%. So just throw some information out there to start off the conversation. Basically, and you guys might ask me, okay, why aren't we looking at December stats? Well, the December stats aren't out. So the stats that we look at and the numbers that we're talking about, unfortunately, as you see them on the channel, are always going to be lag measures, right? And so we have the disadvantage of talking about older data. But the great thing is that we can look back in time. And that's what gives us our advantage when we're starting to think about forecasting and what our opinions are of the future. So thinking about October in 2024 being a 7.7% month-over-month increase in home sales, levels not seen since April 2022, and a recent rate cut bringing us down to 3.25%. And then thinking about all the new sales in the GTA, Kayla, what's your impression leaving 2024? What happened in 2024 for you? What do you see as the near future, the short term for Niagara region?
Niagara has a ton of inventory. We're still at 5 months-ish. So we have a lot. I think I'm seeing a lot of the stuff that's been sitting go. Some of the deals actually that I had on the channel last time, like the duplex that was listed for $374, just sold for $325.
Right.
In calls. I know. I was like, Abdallah's going to roll his eyes for sure.
Oh my God, Kel.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff's happening. But on the flip side, like we just had a few appraisals done. Obviously, this is anecdotal, but we like the full burrs that were bought earlier in the year. They're a thing. The appraisals are coming in pretty decent. So, I mean, I think a lot of good opportunity for a lot of the first-time investors on the smaller stuff. And then on the bigger commercial stuff, we're seeing stuff go that's been sitting for a while as well, but also at a pretty discounted price. So I think there's a lot of opportunity depending on where you are, but from here and all the way up here, just depending on how experienced you are. So that's our neck of the woods.
So Abdallah, what are your thoughts there? I heard you speak up there. What do you think about that? Right. So we got a duplex in Niagara that was listed for like $375 or something for a decent while, because we talked about that almost a month ago, and it just sold for $325. What are you thinking about that, Abdallah?
I'm thinking of that's wild. First and foremost, I actually called Kayla a couple weeks ago just to get her expert opinion on St. Catharines, and yeah, I'd say like Hamilton from a inventory standpoint, I think we're on a more rapid pace of depletion there. But I mean, Niagara, there's absolutely a ton of opportunity. I'm not going to go and start talking about it. Like Kayla's not the expert there, but yeah, to pick up a duplex for $325, like I don't care where you are, that's insane. I don't know if I've to find something with 3 in front of it in Hamilton, that's like you mentioned before, Adam, that's like 1,000 door knocks. that's your 96% LTV. That's some serious negotiating. But those deals are there to me. I have these conversations all the time, even within my personal network, and trying to get our portfolio growing and not losing sight of like entry level stuff that is making sense again. The stuff is out there. You just got to go find it for sure. But again, with Hamilton, like I know our last market update, Adam, that was, the one that we just released through Instagram. Like that was the first time where we saw sales do this, inventory do this. And we had, you said, what was it? 7.7% was that mark that you threw out there. I think our sales were up, 13 to 15%. If I'm not mistaken. I'm going off the top of my head, but I do remember putting together that presentation with Bailey. Like it was a number that was widening the eyes. So I don't know, like I think that the same thing we're talking about kind of off screen, like it feels like there's something coming. It's not fully there yet, but I feel a little bit of optimism for sure.
Okay. Anecdotally, Simon, one thing that Abdullah likes to say on his market updates that I always appreciate is the feeling of the boots on the ground, right? Because there's the stats, which I just mentioned. Again, we have the disadvantage of always lagging stats. Like the stats month by month, it takes like a month for them to come out. So we're always kind of behind the ball on that. But what Abdullah always used to brings up is boots on the ground. So what I'd love to ask you, Simon, is 2024, what did that feel like? You've been in the industry a long time. You've sold a lot of houses. You hold a CPA. You're all about the data. And that's why I want you to tell us about your anecdotal experience. We'll talk about the data later, but how did you feel about 2024 and how do you feel going into 2025?
Yeah, I would say what I've noticed is that I guess I'm basing this off of my clients coming to me and now saying we're ready to shop. And these are clients who started this journey, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, maybe even at the beginning of the year. But I think what the Bank of Canada does is that they give us these dates to look forward to in terms of the interest rate announcement. So I know that we're operating in an environment where interest rates are high. Everyone wants those cuts to happen. And the biggest challenge that I noticed was, okay, we want to buy, but we want to wait. We want to wait until September, October. These rates are coming down. We want to buy now, but we want to close, 120. We want to close 4 months down the line. So, when we see sales kind of growing month over month, and to kind of finish off the year over year, I think sales are catching up too. I think it just tells me that people are smart. People know that if they wait, they're going to get a better rate. If they wait, with the winter months, prices are going to come down. If they wait and not buy in June, prices are going to continue to come down. So I think people are getting smart with the data as well. And I think because, to Kayla's point, because there's so much inventory now, you can be very selective, right? You don't need to rush about missing out on a deal because one, I was going to say there are no deals, but in fact, there are good deals right now. But, if you can't find the property that checks off 90% of those boxes for you, then you can wait until more inventory comes because they're coming. So anecdotally, I feel like people were waiting to get into the market. And now, I'm noticing that because all of a sudden rates have been cut and now I have a bunch of clients who are looking to purchase. So they're now saying, okay, rates have cut. We want to go in before the spring market. So I would say people are smart. People are waiting for these rates to come down. They have. And since inventory is, abundant and there's a lot of it out there, people are being patient and being selective, but now they're starting to pull the trigger slowly.
Yeah, that's a great take. And you know what? Another thing that I found playing a factor in people just holding on, the people are a little bit slower to jump these days, which is interesting. I would have thought this would have the opposite effect, but the implementation of broader technology just being available. So like things like House Sigma, when we were running the wholesaling company, we had so much access to information just based on having a little bit of information asymmetry that the public didn't have. And I feel like that exists to a less and less degree every year that we go. So like House Sigma kind of came up and popped up a couple years ago or a few years ago as being widely used. But now I think it's like kind of maybe not a household name, but a lot of consumers are aware of this product and they look at it and they see data that it's interesting, I guess, from an insight perspective, but it's not always accurate as well, because House Sigma suffers from the same thing that we do. It's a lag measure, right? Something needs to happen, then they need to collect the data, then they need to update it on their systems for it to be reflected to the public. And it just takes a long time to do that. And so I feel like between a more educated consumer and easier access to technology, people are taking a longer sales process now because they want to do more research. They want to look into the numbers more, and they feel like they have a more informed opinion of where their house should be in terms of price. Like, and we saw this for a long time after COVID. And I'd love to hear if anybody experienced that as well. Like after COVID, people were like on the moon for like 2 years almost, right? It was like into 2023 where you're like, hey man, like your bungalow that's in like extreme disrepair, it just isn't worth $3 million. Like, I'm sorry, like maybe for like 3 days in 2021 it was, but it's not now. And they're like, yeah, but listen, right here on House Sigma it is. And you're like, yeah, but that's not real. Like, that's not like what's actually transacting. And they can't see that because they don't have access to like, you know, a matrix where you're seeing the sales day by day instead of reflected later. So I think that's another interesting issue. I think, Kayla, you've talked about it too before, right? With House Sigma, or am I making that up?
No. So one thing that I've noticed recently is like I have House Sigma because my clients will often send me House Sigma, but now it's blocking realtors because it's its own thing, right? So it's now like I have clients sending me listings from there, and it actually says cannot view because realtor, basically. And I'm like, so that's not very helpful for me. And it doesn't even show you the address. Like you're in the dark on what they're sending you. So that just obviously a little bit of a piss off. But in terms of the data, the one thing I don't fully know is where they're getting, what they're basing the value of these houses, because it's always only like 30 to 40, like max maybe 50 grand away from the listing price. So I was reading that they base it heavily off the listing price, which obviously is incorrect. And then some sold data, but in terms of people basing their opinions on it, yes. And it doesn't know what you've done to your house, or in the same stroke, what you haven't done to your house.
Yeah.
So the point about these people with maybe a distressed bungalow or something, there could have been a bungalow that was, done to the nines down the street. And maybe it's pulling data from that because it's the same size, the lot size is the same. And it's, so House Sigma is helpful, I think, but it certainly shouldn't be the be all end all of people's information that they're gathering. Do go to your realtor for actual up-to-date sales information. And we can pull, sales information from a specific area or a specific city, whatever you're looking for. It's helpful, but yeah, it comes with it has shortcomings for sure.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up a really great topic that is important for our viewers to really understand, is like comparable sales mean just that, right? And so when we think about what's comparable, we're also talking about the finishes of the property. And I think that gets lost a lot of the time. Like people just look at a Geo Warehouse report, or they look at some other report that talks about the actual sales data, but doesn't allow you to see inside the property. It's very hard to understand what was the condition of that property when it sold, right? Like maybe 3 years ago, the old pictures look great, but who knows what type of tenant or what type of homeowner they've had in the meantime. And I feel like that's a really big distraction in the data that doesn't always get addressed. And it's honestly just a large issue. Like I found that all the time in the wholesaling company. We'd be analyzing hundreds of deals a week, and you get some number in your head, and then you're like, wait a minute, like, have you seen the photos? Have you done the walkthrough? Have you actually seen the roof and the bathrooms and the flooring and the foundation and the electrical and the HVAC in this building? Like, how are we basing this actual renovation budget? So for those listening at home, I would suggest, like, make sure you're actually seeing photos of these things that you're considering comparable sales. It's not just an address, right? And so when House Sigma gives you a random number, you got to start thinking, like, what is it basing that off of? What actually sold that's recent, relevant, and comparable? And what does that actually mean, right? Same number of beds, same number of baths, hopefully recent, right? Because things have been changing. To Saman's point, the rates have been changing, right? People have been holding on. There's a bunch of pent up demand from people not actually taking action, whether that's on the listing side or the buying side, because they're anticipating changes in the market, whether that's a rate cut or higher inflation numbers earlier in the year, right? So I think there's been a lot of interesting challenges there. Abdullah, what was one key lesson or surprising trend that you saw in 2024?
One key lesson: be ready for anything.
Nice.
The
Agility.
level of unpredictability, and I'm obviously not splitting the atom here with two successful agents, two other successful agents on the call here. From like a coaching perspective for the team, the brokerage, it was always, whether it was an investment or an end user or a pre-con, it didn't matter. You just had to be ready for anything. Like, I know that's a very kind of macro answer, but I can't put it any other way. That it's the level of communication, actually, I would probably put up there from agent to agent, has been vital. Whereas, you look at something, it's a stale listing, you get overexcited, you're telling your client, hey, we're going to take these guys to the cleaners and we're going to get this great deal. And then you don't pre-communicate that or have that, that correspondence with the agent out of the gate. And, you go in there and you're misrepresenting the situation, and it comes back to bite you, and maybe you're losing a client or you've got to really reel them back in. But I would say that to me stands out. Like, if you're asking that question, first thing that comes to mind is unpredictability and never having to think on your feet more than ever this year.
And you know what? I think that's a great answer, and it really does translate into all the various segments of people who watch the channel. Like, for the real estate investor, this year was all about agility, right? I mean, it was dealing with whether the bank was going to cut the rates or not. And then even once it did, they'd announced the next date that they were probably going to cut the rates. So again, you had to deal with an ever-changing environment of like inflation, which is costing you more in terms of like labor, materials, and everything else. And then you had to deal with the potential appraisal challenges in the future. And then how long would it have to sit on the market? Like, if we're looking at Niagara, right? And Kayla's saying there's 5 months of inventory. Like that's a lot of inventory sitting, right? So as a real estate investor, you got to think, like, when I go to list this property, how many days on market am I looking at? You got to really be diligent about working that into your spreadsheet. And that's something I talked about with Savan on one of his market updates. He does a fantastic job at forecasting actual deals and building in that maintenance, building in that vacancy, building in all of those different costs into your initial analysis, so that when changes in the market affect you, you have the ability to be agile and you've already thought about it. Because the worst time to think about needing more money is when you're out of money, right? So something that Saman's brought really well to the channel is a high degree and a high level of accountability when it comes to actually running the numbers. And I think that's one of the most important things we do, because if you run the numbers properly in the first place, a changing environment doesn't really affect you that bad. And so I think for the average investor out there, in like looking at 2025 and rounding out 2024, it's like agility for us means having multiple exit strategies, right? Your core strategy should be very suitable to your initial goal or your broader mission. And you should have a mission statement, right? What am I trying to accomplish? Am I trying to achieve a certain amount of cash flow over the lifetime of my real estate career? Am I trying to hit a certain income replacement goal this year or in the next 5 years or in the next 10? Am I trying to hit a certain cash out or payout from a flip job, right? And it's like, if any of those things go wrong, let's talk about what sort of exit strategies we have and how can we avoid actually losing, because that's the worst thing you can do in real estate, because we're playing with big numbers, right? Leverage is kind of double-edged sword, because it leverages you up and it can leverage you down really quick as well. If you're borrowing too much, we're talking really big numbers and you can get out of control really quick. Simon, anything to add to the data and analysis point there?
Yeah, a lot of things that Kayla said I agree with, and I see here, especially with House Sigma and some of these other apps. I think House Sigma did a decent job in an up market by giving people some sort of understanding of price. In a down market, they're completely off. And I think there's even been studies done to compare House Sigma to some of the other websites that do price projection. And I think House Sigma actually performs, on the worst end when it comes to projecting price. So to Kayla's point, like, I know everyone's using House Sigma. I'm a fan of it because people, aren't asking you for what did this sell for, what did that sell for. But a lot of people are basing their decisions and their thoughts in terms of value on that price, on the house Sigma estimated price, I would say just be cautious of that. Speak to your professionals. And then to Abdul's point, in terms of, managing those expectations, right? I find the same thing. I find people are, sellers and buyers. I'm finding they're starting to discover realistic prices a lot more now. Those conversations of, oh, well, I want 2022 prices, 2023 prices. I think those have kind of, been eliminated now because most of them have sold or most have renewed. I think 2025 will also create some price discovery. I think prices will get more real as these other renewals come up. I was just looking at it now. I think they're saying that by 25 and 26, virtually all of the outstanding mortgages at the major banks will go through that reset. So by 25, 26, I feel like we should kind of know what our bottom is. And then that gives us, new data going forward as well. Now we'll have 2 years of past data post-COVID, and now we'll also have current data as well. So price discovery is real and it's happening, but I think it'll happen more.
Yeah, great point too about the mortgage renewals. So I do think that's going to be interesting, and things have come down a lot. Like I think if the bulk of those mortgages were renewing like a year and a half or 2 years ago, there could have been a lot more damage than what I think we're going to actually experience, because we've come down a long way. Like, I mean, I can Google real quick what like a TD mortgage would be today, but like it has come way down. So I think it's like 3.25, and then it'll probably be like plus 1 or 2. So like, I'm sure you can get a mortgage these days for 4%, right? Which is like, personally, I don't think that's unreasonable, right? Like, I mean, borrowing at 4% is completely acceptable in my books, right? And I think that if you're starting to think about getting into financial trouble or being underwater at 4%, that's scary territory. Because I know a lot of our viewers are going to be, relatively high risk investors, right? I mean, we're borrowing at 15%, 10%. We're purchasing the property, we're adding improvements, we're capitalizing on the equity gained, and then we're refinancing. The whole thing comes down to, though, are these appraisals going to work? And I didn't hear a lot on the channel, people missing appraisals this year, right? There was a little bit of that going on last year. I didn't see a ton of it this year. And with rates coming down, like, I don't see that being the case in the future. And naturally, people are not that smart, right? We're going to borrow as much as we can on average, right? I think most people borrow whatever available credit they get. And that's kind of what puts us in these financial pickles. Sman, I know you got something. Hit me.
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit on that. I'll say the biggest trouble will probably be in the pre-con segment in the GTA, in core GTA. I like the stories that we're hearing from people, buying a $2 million house and they're, food delivery drivers, right? Like they were able to make $5,000 and make a $5,000 payment on a 1.87% rate, but now at 4 or 5%. It doesn't work. But again, to your point, mortgages, I was just looking. So I think 50% will renew by 24, 25. So 50% of those will kind of wash out. And we're already seeing, like in core GTA, I think like Mississauga, Brampton, Markham area, that pre-construction is heavy there. So I think those are starting to correct, and there's bloodbath. But yeah, to your point, like if you're not able to carry at 4%, then Canada is going to be a tough place for you. So
yeah, and that's just the reality. And I mean, inflation numbers were kind of interesting last month when those came out, but I really think so the pre-construction's one thing, right? And we honestly have not found a lot of people watching the channel angling for that in the last few years. I think it's been very difficult to conceptualize pre-con, especially with like COVID. COVID was crazy. And I know we remember, but like, if you weren't paying that close of attention, I was trying to buy pre-construction like as a personal use property, like 2020, right? And then like March of 2020 was when all the COVID stuff started, and it continued long into 21, 22, at least in most areas when it comes to like lockdowns and stuff like that. Lumber was fucking nuts. Contractors were nuts. Every material you could possibly think of at Home Depot was way more expensive. Every contractor was more expensive or booked out or didn't want to work. Everybody was sitting at home collecting fucking grants and like COVID money, whatever that was. And nothing got done. And so the interesting thing is like all that money had to go somewhere, right? So now we've got all these construction opportunities, but nobody wants the damn things. And my personal experience was that the contracts were fundamentally absurd. I looked at a lot of different builders, a lot of different projects, and they had contracts that were like 50 pages long with all sorts of contingencies that insulated their own benefits and had no benefits to the purchaser. And so it's no surprise that with those like items in play, and then they change the actual rules around taxation and stuff with assignments, now you've got a real problem, right? Like now there's just no real case. The thing that propped up the whole freaking business is just not really there. And so I think if Precon wants to fix its stuff, like there just needs to be a little bit of give in terms of like the contracts that they put forward, in terms of assignment rules, like, and the types of taxes and fees that get tacked on when you do things like that. And it's just kind of a sketchy thing anyways. Like you're putting down 20K or 30K, maybe 50, and they're like, it's going to be worth more in the future. And you're like, what? But can you qualify today? I don't know, but it's going to be worth more in the future.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is that? So like, I think anybody watching this channel should caution any type of speculation going forward. And that ties us back to Abdella's point about agility, right? If you're not agile, if you're not adaptable, if you're not ready with multiple exit strategies and having well thought out plans with contingencies built in, and you've done your numbers well, and you've taken a page out of Simon's book to include things like maintenance costs, vacancy, right? All of these things need to be part of the plan, or you're just speculating, and that's not going to work in 2025. I don't think so anyways, because things are moving too fast, right? Like tomorrow, things could all change. Plus, we've got an election coming up, guys, right? So like 2025 is going to be exciting, I think.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm yapping at this point. Kayla, did you have any issues with appraisals this year at all?
No, okay. Not on what was I think I say that as like when we're writing offers for clients or when we're doing our own projects, like we're weighing that heavily in decision making, and I'm sure everyone here is doing the same. And I think that leans into why there was no appraisal issues. Is just we're being pretty, I would say, pretty cautious with that, especially at the beginning of the year. Now, you know that there's a little more comps, a few more things have sold, so it's a bit easier. But we did not have any issues.
Okay, yeah, that's great, because again, like we kind of started this discussion with you saying we sold that duplex finally sold at 325, which is 50K less than what they were targeting with that list price. But you then said you've also got people doing full burrs, which to me means there is a market for things that are A-level quality or at least rehabbed, right? Things that have been actually renovated. So that to me is interesting, because that's where I'd be scared. And that's something we would see as the COVID numbers turn around, right? You would be doing a renovation, and then you'd be watching the solds tick closer and closer and closer and closer and closer down to where your actual cost basis was. And it was terrifying. And you were playing this cat and mouse chase game, right? And I remember I sold the triplex and I was like, holy shit. Like if this thing stays on the market for like 4 more months at these rate drops, and I don't mean mortgage rate. I mean, like the solds were dropping faster than I could keep track of. And I was like, if this stays on the market 4 more months, we're underwater. We've lost money in the deal. And that's like the worst position to be in ever. And so, you know, I don't know if that gives me any credibility or takes away from me on this channel, but that's the position I was in, where I was like, damn, I thought I ran the numbers right, but we went over budget and over time, which naturally brings you over scope. And then all of a sudden you're looking at the numbers and you're like, man, these numbers are falling hard. I hope I get that appraisal when they go to close, right? Because you can agree today on a price, but then they still have to appraise the damn thing to close it, you know, 30, 60, 90 days in the future, at which time the market was still falling, right? And so that was a really scary time to be in. So I think we do receive a lot of comments here that like, maybe the market's not fantastic, but it's certainly not in that position anymore, right? Where things were just plummeting.
I think that
was a scary time.
Will probably be at least very close to a full burr. if that's
Nice.
what they're doing with it. I would suspect, just given the area, and it was a 2-bed and a 1-bed, and at that price point, you don't actually have to get an appraisal that high to have a full berth. So could be good for everyone.
Kayla, can you give just a quick summary on what type of property it was? And when you say full berth, are you referring to like a duplex conversion and then a refi at the end?
It's a legal duplex already. Okay. It has separate meters for each unit and then for the basement. So there's 3 on a tiny little lot. So that's something to keep in mind. It was, I think, about 70 by 50, which I guess is not terrible. It was a 2-bed on one side, 1 bed on the other. It's in like a B- area of Niagara Falls, I'd say.
Yeah.
It was it needed a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but I would
have taken it.
I know. Yeah.
Hey, rep me on the way in. whatever needs to happen.
That one was a good one. That one, I know. I've been like pushing it on. I've been like, guys, this is a good deal. I think I put it on the channel for like the last 3 months, being like, someone buy this. But yeah, that one's a good one. I think whoever bought it's going to do quite well.
Interesting.
So what do you think that would be worth once it's done?
Like exit, I mean, there's some that say the market's a little bit all over the place on the reno end, and that's because people's renovations are obviously all at a different level. Yeah. But like a basic renovation, I think you're going to see that hit at 450 to 550, depending on where you go with it.
Nice. Yeah, 550. That sounds great. Like just napkin math would have that pretty good. That's awesome. Well, I want to move along now. I think maybe Saman, you might be one of the better ones to kick us off with this, but I want to just talk about government policy. What do you think about some of the grants that have been coming out, some of the incentives coming out from the government, whether that's density, whether that's ADU things, whether that's changing of zoning? How is the government playing a role in real estate in your market?
Yeah, I think it's Bill 23 has been very popular. So I've done a couple of interviews with a couple of the mayors here, and specifically want to ask about this: are they for it? Are they not for it? Everyone's for it. Everyone wants it to happen. They don't want NIMBYism. The biggest challenge that I've seen with this is the actual cost associated with the density. And the development charges that the cities are pushing back on, because Bill 23 is saying no development fees, but then the towns are saying we're going to lose a lot of revenue here. So in terms of policy, I think it's good. I'm seeing a lot of positive changes, especially with elections coming up. The Liberals are all of a sudden very concerned about housing and are doing everything they can to try to fix this mess that's been created. But otherwise, I'm for it. I like to see these changes happening, positive changes happening. Just whether they're realistic or not is the big question, I guess, the big asterisk. And unfortunately, a lot of what is being put out there outside of Bill 23 doesn't seem very realistic. Like yesterday, the leader of the Liberals came up with a housing plan, a 3-step. Number 1 was eliminate land transfer tax. Number 2 was eliminate development charges. And number 3 was help with rentals, which all in theory sound great, but you're never gonna get that through. Like which municipality is gonna agree to no land transfer tax? Whereas that drives a majority of their revenue. Which developer is not gonna lobby against eliminating development charges? It doesn't make sense. On paper is one thing, but boots on ground, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, I can't see a lot of those changes happening quickly. And I actually do think a government change is going to really interrupt any progress there, which is unfortunate. Because for better or worse, like one natural tendency in politics is to just disagree. Like whether or not it makes sense to disagree with certain policies, like you can just see it, right? It's on the wall that there's a lot of disagreement and contention lately. And I do have fear as well that as we continue into this like pissing match with the US regarding tariffs and things like that, like I could see there being just like further economic issues there that cause more friction with the government, which distract them from some of these other things like housing. And, obviously they've put in a very interesting and restrictive immigration policies lately as well. So I'm kind of interested in seeing what that does, especially to your market, Saman, with, GTA is obviously the first to know when there's an immigration change. And then it always ripples down. What are your thoughts on that?
Great points. I would say from an immigration perspective, yes, a lot of noise on these temporary workers leaving as well. So which, that's your demand, right? Your immigration is your demand. Immigration is your increase in rent prices. So if these temporary workers are leaving, then, we've got issues with rents there. Sorry, I know you mentioned you had another point that I wanted to touch on, but I just can't recall right now. But another policy thing that I just quickly wanted to mention was the one that I do like is the ability to borrow $80,000 now to create a secondary suite or a third unit and be able to refinance it. I think that's a bonus. That's something that everyone should be looking into to see if they can achieve that. And I think it's a great grant that's come in, and now it's just up for people to decide whether they actually want to do this and become landlords or not. Because obviously the LTB is not in favor of landlords. So if you do that, you're going to have to become a landlord, and it's whether you want to get into that game or not.
Yeah, that's a fair point. The landlord tenant board has been a steaming pile of shit for a long time, and I don't think it's getting any better. And I'm happy to be the first person in the face of the Canadian Real Estate Channel to say that. It is the worst run thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. It is disgusting, disturbing, and fundamentally a problem. I don't know. If they'd let me on CNN or CBC, I'd fucking yell from the rooftops about that. But Kayla, on a more positive note, Niagara's been getting a ton of investment, a ton of infrastructure, a ton of actual attention from the government. I'd say your market, based on our market updates, has been the most favored of all of our markets, which is fascinating, right? Because with a goal of density, with a goal of like increasing housing and all of that, I would have expected Saman's market with the Durham region closer to the GTA to be a lot more exciting when it comes to like, new housing developments, new projects, more density, less rules, less regulations. But that's not really been as exciting as what you've been bringing to us from the Niagara region. So let's talk about that real quick.
I think first, the Niagara housing market was undervalued by the general population. And now it's, people understand its value. And I think that's now slowly happening with businesses and government. And we also have just tons of space. So there's that, like just tons of vacant space. And we're very close to the border. So there's a few different obvious things and reasons why people are coming here and businesses are investing here. So I think it's that. I also think there's been an interesting shift in local government here, very much so more investment forward than previous local governments were. We went to a housing symposium a few weeks ago and it was pretty positive for that. So I think it's a combination of things, but it's like a perfect storm for us, at least in this area. So, and a lot of, like you said, a lot of money being put into infrastructure and everything kind of follows. So the new hospital is probably the biggest ticket item in South Niagara. So with that came a lot of different businesses and stuff. And then we have all those games and there's a lot of sports stuff that happens. I talk about this a lot. I feel like it's one of the number one topics I discuss, but I think there's just a lot of reason to be here. And now finally government's seeing that as well. So.
Yeah, I think there are some really positive things to the type of money and influence that the government can bring to your market. And it is refreshing, right? At least to say, right? It's refreshing that the government, at least on a provincial level, is really investing in one of the cities that's been on the come up, right? The Niagara region's been on the come up for the last few years. And it's great to see the government get behind things like that because they have so much capital. They have such an ability to affect change. And honestly, it's one of the only ways to get infrastructure done. Right? Because the alternative really is levying huge land transfer tax or massive development charges. And unfortunately, Colby can't be here tonight from Barrie, our Barrie expert. Congrats, Colby, on the new baby. But he's got a brand new baby. But Barrie's one of the ones that's been the worst for, he called it the double dip development charge. Right. And this thing was brutal because like you'd get to the end of running your numbers, you'd get started on a project and then they double dip you on development charges, getting up to like $80,000 for a development charge. And these aren't huge properties. These aren't big, huge apartment complexes that we're building. It was like a duplex conversion. And he was like, what the fuck is this? $80,000 is like the whole budget. You can't double my budget for a development charge. And so I feel like it's good to at least contrast that with what they can do when it comes to large investment. I mean, building hospitals, building highways, building schools, building sports arenas and things like that is not cheap. And having the government on your side to get things like that done is a great way to see and kind of forecast the future of these markets. So I think the real insight here, right, is look at where the government is investing their money if you want to understand where you can potentially look to be investing in 2025, right? If you're looking at the market and you're seeing the government invest $1 billion or something like that into a market, looks good to me, right? Windsor's been getting a ton of investment, right? Battery plants, labor all over the place regarding automotive. All sorts of production's been popping up in Windsor. Nobody's freaking talking about it. There's like thousands and thousands of workers coming there from all over the world, and they all need places to live. So Windsor's an interesting place that I'm looking at for 2025 in terms of thinking about like what's going on there, right? When you see $1 billion come into a little market like Windsor, you got to start asking yourself some questions, right? When you see the government step in Niagara and start investing in large infrastructure projects, you got to start asking some questions. When you see things moving more rural or moving away from the cities or collapsing back into the cities, you need to start thinking about what does that actually mean in the markets that I'm looking at. And so I think that's, again, why I believe that the market updates were so important, because we can see month by month what's actually happening in these little pockets of real estate across Ontario. And I would have loved for the channel to be like more national so that we could get better insights from Alberta and from British Columbia. Even Nova Scotia really has been really exciting the last few years. And we didn't get that reach in 2024, maybe 2025 we will. But it's interesting to see what's going on there too with foreign buyer tax issues, right? And issues with immigration now being formed. So I think that's going to be challenging. Abdullah, CMHC, I'd love to chat with you about that because you brought us a lot of really big commercial deals, right? And CMHC, I think, is a really interesting program that is kind of taking the power of the government and saying like, hey, we need help here when it comes to financing. We need to be able to ensure these things and get more leverage out there for some of the bigger buyers. So Abdullah, do you want to chat with us about a few of the changes for CMHC? And honestly, anybody else that wants to jump in on this, feel free as we go. But CMHC, big changes coming up.
Yeah. And before we get into that, I'm just to kind of jump into that, the rezoning and these policy changes. Like I would want to say like Hamilton was one of the first to the party there with the R1A that we sniffed out a couple of years ago. Legitimately through a tweet by Jason Thorpe, who's the head of planning and economic development in Hamilton. This guy's he's out in the public, just a super smart dude. I've listened to him speak a couple of times, but it's obviously revolutionized the city before we get in CMHC, and we just did another rezoning plan. And don't mean to beat a dead horse. I talk about it on the channel all the time, but there's just really nothing you can do. So yeah, obviously the DCs are always going to be a problem. The government, they always need their pockets lined. We all get it. Hopefully we get to the Toronto level and don't have to worry about it to the 5th unit sooner than later. But on the CMHC front, yeah, it's using the personal experiences. So, we own a couple larger buildings out towards the London area. We just went through our first CMHC refinance. Not for the faint of heart, for sure. Lots of moving pieces with turning over rents and invoices, and we did the energy efficiency side. It's a game changer. Like we all know this. Again, I'm not splitting in the atom. I always like to say that. Some major changes happened. So when we did it, to give again, boots on the ground example, this was when they regressed the energy efficiency point system from 100 to 50. That was the most you could do. Just like a million other people, we rushed to the refinance line, and we're able to get out a pretty solid return. But with all those changes that were happening, don't know if all of them off the top of my head, but just in consuming from our mortgage team, the one of the major changes was coming out of a VTB, right? You couldn't go from a vendor take back into a CMHC refinance, which to me kind of makes sense, right? You gotta kind of implement those limitations. But I thought that was a game changer because, I mean, let's call a spade. A lot of these larger projects, you're looking for these vendor takebacks. You're looking to conserve cash so you can redeploy it into your exit strategy. Take that a step further. Us personally, we've, we're in the early stages, and I talked to, Adam, you and I chatted about this on the last video of a potential 16-unit development, but on the land assembly side, right? So that's kind of been around for a while, but it's incredible how it's spread like wildfire. I've had clients who I've presented their deal. It was on Concession Street here in Hamilton, and they did the old knock on the neighbor's door, and now they're going to do a 7-unit CMHC play. I wasn't a part of it, but always, I'm always there with my clients, as we all are. But it's what we've learned too, through Synergy Mortgages, which, Kayla and I are part of that family. They're incredible knowledge base, but not to toot their own horns too much, but what we've learned about is the net new side is a whole different ballgame in terms of what you can achieve on a points level. And now, it's kind of taking that into our own hands and studying that. And I know 555 is breaking ground on a purpose-built fourplex. Again, that's not really CMHC derived, but just the net new kind of wave, especially in Hamilton, with the amount of infill that we see, despite the area. You could be you could drive through one of the roughest parts of Hamilton and you'll see a 25-unit townhouse development, and they'll sell. So the infill side has been it's still going pretty hard. But what else did I say about CMHC? It's to the land assembly side of it, I think is something people have to be mindful of. Like, I've always talked about on the channel, like if I'm buying something, or if I'm the lending hand on a project for a client, I'm never just looking at what you can do right now. I mean, the mindset has of course changed the last couple of years with what zoning has gone. But we were always looking, okay, could we do 3 or 4 down the road? Okay, now the zoning's changed. We can absolutely do it most of the time, if not all. Minor variants here and there, whatever. Most of them do work. But now I'm looking at, okay, can I knock on Fran's door and be like, hey, are we ready to give this puppy up type thing, right? So it's that evolution of mindset of, are we, using that forward thinking? Can I kind of put this thing together? And I don't know how many deals I'd see now where, from 4 to 50 units that, they're all MLI select, right? The more niche product of it with energy efficiency, accessibility, and what's the third one there? Affordability, which isn't, that's few and far between, but there's incredible opportunity. I don't know. And I've heard, I don't want to maybe speak out of turn, maybe early rumblings of eventually CMHC producing, their products around 4 units. Maybe just, something I heard in passing. Obviously, we all know it's 5+, but if it ever got down, to me, it just makes sense. Like all municipalities, and Guelph just announced it. So I've got somebody in Guelph that I know through a buddy of mine here, and I was chatting with him just last night through Instagram, and he posted an announcement. Guelph's finally on board, right? They're doing what Hamilton's doing. They're letting you go to four legal units. So it's to me, it's all coming. There's a ton of opportunity out there, and what I want to finish with, it's not daunting whatsoever. There's a lot of information out there. Obviously, you got to sidle with the right type of people. But where I was going with there, as all these municipalities are transitioning to allow legal 4-unit conversions is, I don't know, kind of makes sense. Like, would all the municipalities are going to it? Will CMHC kind of meet the municipalities there to be like, okay, I can enhance this even more to hopefully get more of these units out there. But again, the land assembly side of it, I think, is an absolute game changer because it allows even more entry level or intermediate level investors to jump into the CMHC side of things, which was never a thing before.
Yeah, and from the entry perspective too, in January 15th, 2025, they're introducing the ability to use insured mortgages to add additional units into your existing properties, right? So the requirements are you have to already own the property, the borrower or close relative are occupying one of the current units, you intend to construct additional units, and the additional unit must not be used as a short-term rental. So a bit of a dig on the short-term rental investors. But at the same time, these refinancing products are allowing people to build legal units that obviously add an additional unit to their existing properties. There's a maximum property value limit of $2 million. I think we could pull into question there what value really means when they say value limit. I mean, I could probably pay Abdullah to say something that's worth 1.9 that was worth 1.3. But no, I'm just kidding. But seriously, that's a weird term, value. I guess they're talking about appraised values.
Appraised, I would imagine.
Maximum loan to value limit of up to 90% of the property value, including the value added secondary suite. So that's an interesting thing. Amortization on this product is going to be 30 years as a maximum, and additional financing must not exceed the project cost, which is a fascinating little caveat there. But what that's interesting for is essentially, I just said a lot of shit, but what that really means is you can add a new unit to your existing property as long as you live in it, and you can finance that with the CMHC product up to 90%, which is fantastic. And so I really like that product. That helps people get into these smaller properties and these opportunities to add additional dwelling units. Simon, did you have anything you wanted to add about the CMHC?
No, I mean, I think Abdullah did a great job of summarizing that. But yeah, I think it's a game changer. People got to, figure out ways to utilize these programs, putting it out there, and it's got to get utilized. Or if it doesn't, we're not really solving anything.
Yeah, and I think it could be interesting in your market because the maximum property value is just adjusted up to $1.5 million, which is going to make this product a lot more accessible for people to use that are closer to like Durham or the GTA, any of these areas where like it's not, it's conceivable to buy an over $1 million house and still want to put down less than 20%, right? And so there's great products out there now. And I mean, on a $1.5 million purchase now, you're not putting down 300,000, you're putting down 125. So that's fantastic. Or 150, whatever, one of those two. But I mean, that's a serious change in the liquidity required to get into certain properties. And I think that will have interesting effects in the GTA, which always has interesting effects everywhere else, right? Because all the time, like GTA is the canary for the coal mine, which is everybody else. So what I've always noticed is that as property values rise or decrease in the GTA, people come in or out of the city. And as properties get more expensive, people get further and further away from the city because of that trickle down effect, right? There's just, when houses are $2-3 million in Toronto, a lot of people just can't afford to live there. So they move to Barrie, right? Or they move to Durham, or they move to Niagara, right? And so of course these markets get the benefit of that influx of people and that demand. And so their prices rise. And I think it's always interesting. On that note, do you guys have any emerging opportunities for us? Is there anything that you've noticed either in your market or adjacent markets coming up that you think is interesting that we should know?
That's a good question.
I'll go. Niagara Falls just had a meeting last night about allowing legally Airbnb a unit in your primary residence. So if that's something you're interested in, that's something they're looking at. And they're going to use the money from those licenses to police the illegal ones more strongly. But it does offer an interesting opportunity for people that live in Niagara Falls or that are looking to live in Niagara Falls that might want to do Airbnb in their secondary suites of some sort. So
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what? I think it's always worth talking about these things on the channel because a lot of people get it in their head that like a certain strategy is dead or dying or gone. And I think most strategies are available during most market cycles. And short-term rentals are certainly not dead. They're not gone. They're not really going away. People always need to travel. Hotels are generally kind of sucky compared to the experience you could have on an Airbnb. And so I think there's always going to be a demand for that. And one thing that's interesting, because I'm generally a libertarian on a lot of different policy, but I do think Airbnb is one of those things where like having a rental license or some sort of licensing for it, I don't mind that, right? Because most of the things that are complaints about short-term rentals are like noise complaints and things like that. These things are already talked about in your bylaws, right? Your bylaws address most of the issues that people have with things like short-term rentals, like people are having parties, people are too loud or whatever. That shit's already covered by your bylaw. So if it's just a money grab and you just want a licensing to be able to make sure that they're safe, people aren't dying in these things, they're not fire hazards and whatever, fine, great. Use that money and take that money and go enforce things that are dangerous or scary or whatever, right? Like I don't see any issue with that. And honestly, I love when we talk about this in markets because if Niagara Falls does this, maybe we can anticipate that coming out to other markets, right? Maybe we see that pop up in Cambridge. Maybe we see that pop up in the GTA or any other area. And I think it's interesting to talk about those different changes. So thank you for bringing that to us. Anybody else have anything come top of mind with that?
All I know is that Hamilton is constantly rezoning.
Yeah.
Just had one pretty recent, and then we just sold very interesting property. An agent on my team sold it, maybe one firm a couple weeks ago, and we set up a meeting with an urban planner, a local urban planner, and he was alluding to the fact that there's another one coming in the spring. So it's probably the best information I can throw out there from the Hamilton front is it is consistently getting easier and easier. I just wish I could find a duplex conversion for 3.25.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next
Seriously.
time I'll call you. Promise.
Oh, good.
Or you just watch the market updates, Adela. It was on there twice.
I know. I barely watch myself. I just got to start watching Kayla here.
My God.
What's going on?
Yeah, rezoning's been interesting, right? Barrie rezoned. You guys rezoned a couple times. Lots of markets doing the rezoning thing. And I think that's fantastic, right? Because that's one of the levers that we pull on for that density. And it's obviously like we made that ADU series with 555 Construction there to start talking about like, how can we do this, right? Like there's a lot of questions surrounding the mystery of density in new builds. And we just kind of shit on pre-con a little bit. And so if we're going to do that, we at least need to address like, what's the solution then? And I do think like for a lot of people, you have the property in your portfolio that you could add density to. And so for a lot of people, it became the question about cost. Like, what does this actually cost? How does it get done? Do the existing services or utilities on my property allow me to add that type of density? And the answer for the most part has been yes, right? Most of the properties we went and checked out with 555, these are regular properties. These are like 45 foot wide, 100 deep, right? Or 30 wide and 75 deep. These are not giant, like I think people are picturing like these like acre wide properties that are like massive. And it's like, actually, if you have a decent sized detached garage, or if you have a property where there's like a relatively large green space in the back, like you can make something happen here. Like, and the projects that we went out and toured, I was genuinely shocked. I mean, these were literally just normal lots. Like it was just a normal house that had too big of a driveway in the back. Boom, 200 grand later, you pop up a brand new structure and people are like, oh my God, it's 200 grand. What's the cost per square foot? Shut the fuck up. Look at the numbers, people. 200 grand, and then it rents for 2,500 a month. Okay, that's 1% freaking rule, you dummies. And then you can finance it as the new property with its number of units. And that's what people don't understand. Like it's like I'm yelling at a wall, and people just won't hear you. And it's like, God damn it! Now you took your duplex. It's now a triplex. It gets appraised as that. You get your money back and out. And now it's cash flowing what otherwise would have been a freaking pile of gravel. And you want to talk to me about 200 grand? Shut up. Go to the bank, get the money. It's leveraged. You're not coming up with 200 grand in cash. Nobody has $200,000 in cash. Nobody. Okay. You're going to the bank, you're financing it, and you're using their money to go build you a structure that somebody else goes to work for 40 hours a freaking week, 4 weeks a month to pay for it. And you get the benefit of cash flow and principal pay down and all those great things that we get from being real estate investors. I'm sick of the discussion about cost because it doesn't make any sense. When you can build something for 200 and you rent it for 25, it's a freaking net positive. So I'm just putting the nail in that coffin because that's stupid and I'm sick of it. It's just ridiculous. Like, I'm actually sick of that. Okay, so getting out of my rant, commercial real estate. Commercial real estate got super freaking beat up. And I think this might be one of our kind of wrapping up segments. There's maybe 1 or 2 questions left that I want to ask. But commercial real estate, is it relevant in your markets? Do you see that being relevant in the future, 2025? Is this something we're investing in? Is this something we're scared about? Are the sociological impacts of COVID still hitting us where people are just working from home? What has your experience been? And I know, Abdel, you've brought us a lot, but if anybody else wants to talk about commercial, more than happy to talk about that because there is a small segment of people that watch the channel that would be interested.
I'll quickly touch on what I see in the Durham region. So from a commercial perspective, I would say it's very busy. So there's a lot of, obviously being the Durham region, up north, we have a lot of green space. This green space has now gone through, there's actually an area in Oshawa called the Northwood Business Park, around 700 acres of land. It was zoned agriculture and now it's been completely rezoned for industrial use. So now all this green space has turned into warehouses. So there's Amazon warehouses there. There's Lactis, the milk facility there as well. So we're noticing a lot of industrial happening in the Durham region. It's happening because from a tax perspective, it brings in a lot of tax revenues that the city likes, helps with a lot of, CapEx spending. And yeah, there's a lot of properties here that allow for it to happen. It does require some rezoning, but nonetheless, it's all in the secondary plans that are available to the public. So we're noticing a lot of industrial happening here. Definitely a bigger play. The land is of course expensive to purchase. The build is more. But again, this is a whole nother game to get into. But it is pretty active here, and the demand is pretty high.
Interesting. Abdullah, what's going on commercial wise?
Like I would say in Hamilton, like just to step aside from like your just any sort of an existing commercial asset, and I've talked about this again on the channel. Turning commercial to res has been again pulling the CMHC aspect back into it. That's been a very, very not effective, but it's been a very consistent strategy the last few years here in Hamilton as you rezone. And Hamilton is full of these empty shells, these long gone businesses in the downtown core that really pose well for conversions. So let me get that out first. I think it's the same, right? We all know office space is struggling. Although what we're getting a lot of in our area, and I'm sure it's other people can echo the sentiment, is industrial condos are like new build industrial condos. So, I mean, these are pretty wide range uses, anywhere from office up to warehousing, so on and so forth. They've been pretty diligent on the resale side. I've been a part of a few in the last year and a half. Done a couple leases, one out in Burlington, one I know not strictly Hamilton, but a couple on the East Mountain. So those are definitely alive and well. But to me, it's all relative. I don't know if I can pinpoint anything that's like super slow. Again, if it's priced ridiculously, then sure, it's just going to sit just as if you're selling a $325,000 duplex in Niagara Falls. But I think let's tie in business sales as well. I think that's obviously in the commercial sector. Those are becoming. I've talked to a lot of guys that I know just like through like that are client facing, or guys that I know in my network that do invest, that are pivoting towards businesses. I think that's been a strategy. People looking for long-standing businesses that are highly secure. That dry cleaning business, we're in pretty deep with a potential buyer right now. Not to say that they're not, they're definitely not easy sales. Retail plazas, they're trading like, give me a couple anchor tenants, 6 to 8 units, something, a little bit more modest. They're trading, right? Again, the cap rate makes sense. We've got one going up next week. That's a pretty popular building in Hamilton, 19 office spaces and 2 retail. So I can definitely talk about that sometime in the new year and how that's going, how that went. But I feel like it's everybody wants to think it's dead or whatever the case is, but there's a ton of investors that have shifted out of res and gone from like, hey, I want a 4-plex or a triplex to I want a mixed use, or I want again like a small retail plaza that has stability, and I'm dealing now with commercial tenancies as opposed to somebody that is going to stop paying you in month 3. So I think it's alive and well in Hamilton. Not say that anything's flying off the shelves. It's all at the mercy of the market, but Hamilton, it gives you a little bit of a different spin on what you can do with these properties, right? So anything I look at, I'm like, okay, it's office space, it's kind of broken up, like the configuration's kind of open. All right, can I take this? Can I turn this into, I know Kayla was part of a really cool one that I actually toured as well way back, but down by the harbor front, right, Kayla? That thing was incredible. The size of the lot. Yeah. Right. So obviously we won't divulge any details, but there's an incredible amount of opportunity. That's all I can say. Like, people are shifting there. There's stability, right? Stability, especially with not dealing with, Jane Doe and people that are, unfortunately, can't make ends meet and all that. So in terms of stability and security, I don't blame the general residential investor population that, okay, let's think bigger, right? And there's a lot of cool programs out there, right, in the commercial world. High loan to value. Sometimes you're getting 100% loan to value. I know Kayla and Milan pulled that off a little while back, and I've got a client that's looking to do that with BDC right now for his engineering business, like our engineer Mike at Deck Inc. So a lot of opportunity, right? To me, it all comes down to the lending component of it, right? And that's where you're finding the best course of action.
Awesome. Kayla, what's your experience with commercial business here?
We're having a lot of like hospitality people come back into the market, and that's probably because of our, like, Milan runs his food page and whatnot. So we're friends with kind of that large group of people. But yeah, people looking for restaurant opportunity, cafes, like that type of thing again, which was definitely dead during COVID. A bit of office space, but like smaller scale office, like similar to what ours is. And then the cool program, which is what Abdullah was talking about through Meridian, like the 100% loan to value if you're occupying the space.
Cool.
A few people exploring that as well. So
that's for like owner operators. So like you want to own the building and you are the operator of the business going into it. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know about that program at all.
Yeah. If I may add, and I know with BDC, just because I'm going through right now, I don't know, Kayla, if this was the case with Meridian, but there's a construction component to it as well, an improvement component where they'll lend you, I guess, it's almost like a commercial style purchase plus program.
We didn't need it, so we didn't explore it. But I know
it was there.
I think Meridian does something similar to that, but which is great to know that there's more than one option out there for it.
100%.
Yeah, that's fantastic, guys. Well, I know anecdotally, I had a listing of a rental listing for a commercial unit of mine. I had it up for like 2 years. Absolutely crickets. And then like 2 months ago, I got like literally like 25 calls in like the span of a week. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? What has happened? What has changed in the market or in the attitude of the people in this small town near Collingwood? But all of a sudden, and again, this is one unit, anecdotally, terrible sample size. You can't base anything off of this. But my own experience, absolute crickets on this listing forever. It was like 2 years on the market. And then dozens of calls, and finally tenanted the unit. And I'm absolutely ecstatic about it. And so I guess therein lies the risk of commercial units, but also I think to Abdallah's point, there is a certain degree of security once you secure them, right? I've got a 12-month lease with the option to extend for 12 more months. There's no landlord tenant board up your ass with terrible deals. You've got unlimited ability to affect the agreement once it's in play. So you can raise the rents if you need to, or if you want to, you can change the conditions of the agreement, and you don't have to worry about the landlord tenant board. And I love that. So anecdotally, I've had a great experience this year, but not for the last couple, with my commercial unit that I was trying to rent out. So I'm really excited about that. And definitely it gave me a bit of optimism where I wasn't quite sure what was going on there in that market for all that time. So it's good to hear. Like, I mean, restaurants coming back, that's a great sign, right? That's like your local economy. That's how neighborhoods change, by the way. I think that's my theory anyways. You get a great restaurant in like an okay neighborhood, and that neighborhood will kind of overnight become a better neighborhood, right? We saw this in the Oldies Village in London a few years ago. Oldies Village got a few like really nice restaurants. And then all of a sudden, this like complete crack den turned into like absolutely one of the best neighborhoods in all of London to live, rivaling, and Londoners will be pissed and drop me a comment. It's cool. Rivaling Wortley Village. And I know that's an absurd statement for anybody from London, but I'm serious. And all it took was a few great local businesses, a few restaurants, and a few other cool local shops. And that neighborhood became a vibrant, beautiful, safe, community-oriented place. And that's what actually changes your market. And so I'm really excited about that. Heading into 2025, I'm hoping that we see more from the government. Okay, so this is going to be kind of my wrap-up statement, and you guys can add anything you want. I would love to see some policy changes. I like the angle and the approach that we're seeing with the rezoning. I like what I'm seeing when it comes to government grants. There's been a lot of grants and programs related to density. So right now, like cities like St. Catharines, you can get some fantastic grants when it comes to ADUs. I mean, we're seeing $20,000 to $80,000 grants, which when you think about a grant, that's free money, right? You're not paying that back. That's not a loan. Right. So if you can get 80 grand, I don't care what renovation you're doing, that's a fantastic help. Right. Because 80 grand, when you really think about it, if you were to go put your cold hard cash into that, that means you probably will have had to make 160 grand, right, in your job or whatever it is that you do to make money, because taxes are a bitch. And so a grant is fantastic because you don't have to suffer through that. And so I love seeing these grant programs. I love the rezoning. I love what I'm seeing with CMHC giving more affordability to people. One side note, just before I continue, I saw a great comment this year on the channel. Somebody was disagreeing with me about the CMHC being a good thing. And I appreciate his perspective, because he said something along the lines of, if people couldn't afford these things, they shouldn't be doing it to begin with. And they should have to put down minimum 20 to 25%. I'm with you. I hear you. I understand your perspective. I don't think you're wrong. However, there's another angle that I like to say and I like to explore on here. And that's the concept that the cost of living when it comes to purchasing a property, whether it's something that one of our viewers just rehabbed and it's like a beautiful new place, or it's maybe something that you could add your own strategic value to by, replacing kitchens, flooring, bathrooms, landscaping, lighting, paint, those types of things. When you're coming in and you're actually putting down 5% or whatever it is that you can to get into the property, and there's these programs available for you to do that, it becomes accessible. And when cost of living is close to that of renting, and like when ownership and rentals are close, ownership is very interesting, because as long as you don't have large capital expenditures, you can generally, as long as you can afford to stay in it for a long term, count on some appreciation as well as forced savings while you hold that asset. And I think that is a really unique opportunity for people who don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of wealth, to start beginning to build wealth. And that's how I got to where I'm at. It's by building wealth through strategic value adds, right? And you don't need to be a contractor to do that. In some cases, you just need to pay the bills and hold on and wait, right? But we're talking about long periods of time. And I think that's where this gets misunderstood. I believe that these government assistance programs that help people get into a property so long as they can hold it long term are hugely beneficial to wealth building for average Canadians, right? Dangerous for some, but really, 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 really beneficial for others. And I believe the pros outweigh the cons. So I think zoning, cuts and regulations would be great. I think the grant programs are fantastic. I think the CMHC changes are really optimistic for just the numbers of 2025. And then finally, I do believe that we'll see a conservative government probably come in. And I think that that means a lot of these things will change in a positive direction as well, right? Like, to me, that generally symbolizes less regulation, less red tape, more money, right? And so I'm really interested to see what happens with that type of change. And so I guess overall, I'm optimistic for 2025. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that, but that's kind of my sort of wrapped up thoughts for 2024 and going into 2025. If someone has anything to add, let's do that now, and then we'll wrap this up.
I can go first. There's optimism for sure, but we'll wait and see here.
Hey, yo, optimism, but not right now.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like I think my colleagues here can attest to. It feels like it's happening, then it sputters and so on. I think it's slowly gaining traction, but I think focusing on the right things as an investor that's relative to your situation. I know that's about as generic as I can sound.
Yeah. But
with these CMHC programs, forget MLI Select, but like the 90% loan of value, this arbitrary $2 million valuation we were talking about earlier, like these programs, like they have legitimacy to them, right? They just have to work for you. So I think, there's a bit of a storm happening here. I think it's still going to take some time, and but I'm cautiously optimistic that we are turning a corner. I watch activity on our listings across the board at our brokerage very intently, and when I see come in and agents like, hey, I need to talk to you about this, and I'm countering, and I got a VTB, and I'm like, okay, it's starting to happen here. But in conclusion, going back to that, whoever commented there, Adam, on what was the comment? If you can't afford it, don't buy it.
Yeah.
Essentially,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things in life we can't afford, but we still buy. That's the power of leverage, right? And that's what the world basically leans on here. So, but I am looking, all kidding aside, we did our business planning today for a few hours in the afternoon, and just a lot of optimism, from agents and from what they're enduring with their clients. So I am looking forward to 2025 and forgetting 2024 in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Kayla, anything to add?
I feel like you guys covered it quite well, but I think I'm also optimistic.
Cautiously.
Yeah, cautiously with Abdullah.
You're on the ish fence. Okay. Saman?
Yeah, optimistic as well. Like my focus with my clients has been take a look at your cash position and really trying to understand how much cash you're going to leave in a deal. To me, a refinance or a higher appraisal is high risk at the moment. So my advice has been if you're buying, find a turnkey property so you leave as little cash in the property as possible. And I've done this in my presentations where I say, look, take a look at the cash on a turnkey versus take a look at the cash on a as is with renovations. So if we can buy properties with little cash left in the property, that gives us money to play with either the existing property, previous properties that we own, or just another property. So that's just been, my suggestion to my clients. But yeah, I'm optimistic. I think there's going to be more properties coming to market, more opportunities. Rates coming down is going to help affordability for sure, but I don't necessarily think that price is going to go through the roof here.
Yeah, there's some interesting stats that I was able to find. It, everyone's got their predictions, and most of the brokerages put out like forecasts, and a lot of the financial institutions do that. And I've seen every number really from 4% up to a 7% increase in price forecasted for 2025. I'd probably be more on the low end of that if you were just asking me, is it going to be 4 or 7? I'd probably say closer to 4. Based on absolutely no data, but just kind of a feeling that it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a rocket ship. Like, I don't think we're going to the moon from here to March. I think that we'll probably experience a good spring market and then probably another good fall market. But, I think with normal seasonality, like slow summer, slow winter, it's going to keep those numbers down. Like, I think it's going to be around that 4%. Which is nice. I mean, that's traditional. When I forecast things on my spreadsheet, by the way, I never look beyond 5% natural appreciation. I just don't, because it just doesn't make that much sense. But here we are. So Canadian Real Estate Association, CREA, anticipates a 6.6% rise in home sales. So the actual number of sales being conducted. I think I agree with that. I mean, I think I'd say that's probably on par. I think there's going to be a lot of sales, but that doesn't necessarily mean price is going to be going up 7%. That's a big rise, and honestly, probably an unhealthy rise. So I think I'm with them on that. And we've probably bottomed, I think, right, on rates. I don't think we're going to see like another 50 basis points coming up or another, huge rate drop. So I think this is kind of it. And I think we'll have a nice update as we go into the new year. Just seeing like what does that really do? I mean, there's been a lot of people on the sidelines. We all know that. A lot of people watching the channel, they've been on the sidelines. They've been saying, we don't really know if it's a great time. Should we wait? What's the best time? All that. So, oh my God, Ben G's back in the comments. Guys, this is our oldest fan. This is our best, most loyal fan. So Ben, welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Channel. We are back, baby. That is a great, that right there. That's like Wyerton Willis seeing a shadow. There's going to be more. There's going to be a way better market outlook for 2025 now that Ben's back in the comments. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today for this real estate roundtable. I really do appreciate all your contributions to the Canadian Real Estate Channel. I know you guys work hard to produce the market updates every single month, but it's honestly extremely useful for the people that watch the channel. Okay. The unique insights, the type of deep diving data that we do, the type of research and insight that you guys bring to the channel is truly fantastic. And again, whether that's from Kayla bringing us updates on important dates and infrastructure builds and like fun tools like the interactive map, that was really quite something. Abdella bringing us things like businesses for sale. That's a whole different category, a whole different diversity to the channel that is extremely beneficial for people to think about, right? This channel is all about critical thinking and doing real things. And critically thinking, I mean, there's lots of really interesting ways to buy a building with a business, right? That changes how you can finance things. That changes how you can create revenue from that building and that investment type. And I think it's really in line with the problems or profits mentality. So thank you, Bella, for that. And Saman, of course, the data guy, right? This guy is always bringing us data-driven insights. And I love that. It's things that we can dive in on the channel. We can talk through the numbers and actually make sense of what's going on in the market so that we're not just another freaking realtor on the internet saying it's time to buy, right? And I know that we get torched a lot in the comments. People are like, it's always buying season. Well, it is, okay, when you actually run the numbers. And so, Saman, I appreciate your honesty and integrity with the data that you bring to the channel and the strong focus to reality that you bring, right? That's important, right? We want to ground our decisions in reality. It is problems or profits. There are deals in every market cycle and in every market that can always be found. But we must approach those deals with cautious optimism, as has been detailed on this stream, and through the perspective of data. I mean, it's just how it works. And that's how all of us have become successful. It's by doing the right thing repeatedly over time with consistency and accountability. So, yeah, I guess that wraps up our stream for today. Thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. And if anybody has remaining questions that's watching this either on a playback or right now, feel free to DM me. I am Adam JD Martin on every stream. You guys know how to get in contact with everybody on this stream. They should be tagged in the video down below. And with that, good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, guys. Have a good night.